Hazur, this verse is number 21 from Surah Yasin. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَىٰ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ اتَّبِعُوا مَنْ لَا يَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. This is the same, isn't it?
Continuation.
Continue after a few verses. Previous one.
That's the same
Yes.
incident.
The translation has been given here as follows. And from the farthest part of the town there came a man running. He said, O my people, follow the messengers. Follow those who ask of you no reward and who are rightly guided.
The point is, you first relate the whole thing. Otherwise I'll not be able to answer it.
Huzur, in the same chapter previously we were discussing and Huzur was explaining these two verses.
No, just before that verse which you quoted, the verses 1 or 2 before.
I see.
Let's put that verse into the proper context.
Yes. Huzur, can I read 4 or 5 verses?
Oh, go ahead. Of course.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. وَاضْرِبْ لَهُمْ مَثَلًا أَصْحَابَ الْقَرْيَةِ إِذْ جَاءَهَا الْمُرْسَلُونَ إِذْ أَرْسَلْنَا إِلَيْهِمُ اثْنَيْنِ فَكَذَّبُوهُمَا فَعَزَّزْنَا بِثَالِثٍ فَقَالُوا إِنَّا إِلَيْكُمْ مُرْسَلُونَ قَالُوا مَا أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُنَا وَمَا أَنزَلَ الرَّحْمَنُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِنْ أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا تَكْسِبُونَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا يَعْلَمُ إِنَّا إِلَيْكُمْ لَمُرْسَلُونَ وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ قَالُوا إِنَّا تَطَيَّرْنَا بِكُمْ لَئِن لَّمْ تَنْتَهُوا لَنَرْجُمَنَّكُمْ وَلَيَمَسَّنَّكُمْ مِنَّا عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ قَالُوا طَائِرُكُمْ مَعَكُمْ أَإِن ذُكِّرْتُمْ بَلْ أَنْتُمْ قَوْمٌ مُسْرِفُونَ وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَىٰ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ اتَّبِعُوا مَنْ لَا يَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ وَمَا لِيَ لَا أَعْبُدُ الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ أَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِهِ آلِهَةً.
Now this verse again puts us back into the same position of doubt as to who these were. That verse which you first mentioned was indicative of Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Harun and the third person who appeared and told his people, don't murder them and this and that. That was indeed applicable to al-Mursaleen, to these people. But this verse does not seem to be applicable. It seems to indicate a different story altogether. So let's take up the issue all over again. Read that. Offhand, no such incident comes to me with reference to history, with reference to the human history and that of prophets. I don't remember any such incident having been quoted either by the Holy Quran, elsewhere or by any divine book which tells us of 3 prophets having been sent. Because here the expression is very clear. It does not refer to Moses and Harun alone. It refers to 3 different prophets of equal status as al-Mursaleen. You understand? So, thank you for pointing out, but this has created a grave problem for us now. Thanks to you again. Please tell me. The thing which I can say for certain is the style of this verse. Aqsa al-Madina is a reference to Egypt of the time of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. The word Aqsa al-Madina, the expression is used elsewhere also. Somebody is coming from one end to the other. The 2 ends of the Medina of that period, of Egypt, of Cairo, shall we call it, where at one end the pharaohs and the great royal houses are built. The pharaoh's palace and the great royal houses are built, and the other end is the end of the common people, most often Israelites. So that is why, with reference to the story of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, when it is decided that he should be murdered because he killed a man of the royal house, you read this, a man came running to him from Aqsa al-Madinah. You remember that? So the style is still, strangely, the same style as that of the Egypt of the time of Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So, but it adds a fourth man, in fact, now. But when a fourth man is added, then al-Mursaleen cannot refer to that third man, because he was not a Mursal as such, and he was not rejected as a Mursal. So this is the added problem, which we must understand clearly. The verse's style is that of the time of Hazrat Moses, and the Medina seems to be the same place of Cairo of olden days, but at the same time, this man who hurries from one place to another seems to be the fourth man, not the third man. But then he refers to all the three, if there are three, as prophets of Allah who have been rejected. The only thing which is I think which must be investigated now is whether three are mentioned or just Mursaleen are mentioned. Azazna Salisin is a very clear expression which includes two prophets and a third person. But here, read it again and we should find out, we should concentrate on this. Never before I took notice of this. Thank you for reminding me of all this. And thank you for, of course, the problem. Please.
Verses, إِذْ أَرْسَلْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ اثْنَيْنِ فَكَذَّبُوهُمَا فَعَزَّزْنَا بِثَالِثٍ.
یہ کون سی verse پڑھیں؟ وہی پہلی، وہ نہیں میں کہہ رہا، اسی verse کو پڑھیں. ہاں.
وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَىٰ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ اتَّبِعُوا مَنْ لَا يَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ.
یہ اس سے پہلے کیا ہے؟ اس سے پہلے verse پڑھیں.
اس سے پہلے ہے قَالُوا إِنَّا تَطَيَّرْنَا بِكُمْ لَئِن لَّمْ تَنْتَهُوا لَنَرْجُمَنَّكُمْ وَلَيَمَسَّنَّكُم مِّنَّا عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ قَالُوا طَائِرُكُم مَّعَكُمْ أَئِن ذُكِّرْتُم بَلْ أَنتُمْ قَوْمٌ مُسْرِفُونَ. وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَىٰ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ اتَّبِعُوا مَنْ لَا يَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ.
Now here the word Mursaleen may apply to all the prophets as such. That seems to be the only solution to me, because the context is the same. And the three which are mentioned earlier in this verse are not the ones who have been rejected. Only two of them have been rejected, for whose sake the third one appeared. But this statement is, I think, is a generalized statement which applies to all the prophets of Allah. O my people, do not reject or defy al-Mursaleen. Al-Mursaleen is a class of prophets. So that could be the escape route, the only possible escape route, I think. You understand? Please. That's only one part which has been, I hope, resolved. But the second part is who came from where and to whom did he address. So read the verse again and we should determine that and try to determine that. Huh? Follow the problem? Good.
وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ يَسْعَىٰ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ اتَّبِعُوا مَنْ لَا يَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ.
Yes. Who are they? Read again, read further, on.
اتَّبِعُوا مَنْ لَا يَسْأَلُكُمْ أَجْرًا وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ وَمَا لِيَ لَا أَعْبُدُ الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ أَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِهِ آلِهَةً إِن يُرِدْنِ الرَّحْمَنُ بِضُرٍّ لا تغن عنی شفاعتهم شیئا ولا ینقذون انی اذن لفی ضلال مبین انی آمنت بربکم فاسمعون قیل ادخل الجنۃ قال یا لیت قومی یعلمون بما غفر لی ربی وجعلنی من المکرمین وما انزلنا علی قومہ من بعدہ من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلین ان كانت الا صیحة واحدة فاذا هم خامدون یا حسرة علی العباد ما یاتیہم من رسول الا كانوا به یستہزئون.
Now, which people are they? Sahatan Wahida is also mentioned. And, to begin with, it seems to be related to the incident which was quoted above. The incident of Moses and Aaron having been rejected. And the township seems to be the same as the verse runs on. The end is slightly different than one should expect, because the end seems to be referring to a person who was very pious. Some incident must have happened which made him reveal his faith openly and talk to the people, addressing them clearly that your attitude is wrong and I follow the attitude of those people who believe the prophets, and whatever may happen to me, I do not care. Such a person may have been the same person as mentioned above, but then he would not rush from one part of the Medina to the other, so I don't believe he is the same person. It seems from this that after Hazrat Moses parted, the first incident of their planning to murder him was not in relation to any crime which Moses had committed. It was just, in their eyes, the crime of claiming to be from God. That seems to apply to an early part of Hazrat Moses after he returned from Madian. You understand? Later on, again he left. See, there are two hijrahs. First hijrah of having committed a murder, so-called murder, which took place. Then he returned. Then the people generally, sometimes some people accept him, some reject him from among the Israelites. But most of the Pharaoh's people reject him. Then they plan his murder just because of his having claimed to be a prophet of God. Right? Now this incident of repeated plan of his murder took place much after the first incident. Remember? The first incident where he killed somebody by mistake. So there are two hijrat, or should we say migrations by Moses. First, not as a prophet of God, but as a criminal, so-called criminal, in the sight of his people. And there, their judgment seems to be right, because he did murder somebody. However, by mistake, but the law is blind to that fact. If somebody commits a murder, he should be murdered. So there, their decision seems to be right, but he escapes. The second time, when he returns, a new issue is taken up, the previous is dropped. No reference is given to their planning of murdering him because he had murdered somebody. A new issue is raised. This man claims to be from God, and as such he should be murdered. Right? Now then Moses leaves after the Exodus. The Exodus takes place, and along with his people he leaves the country. Now the point I'm raising, why I'm thinking loudly, is who this man was and to whom did he address and when did he address them as such. Got the problem? And this is our problem, joint problem. We must resolve it together by helping each other, okay? Please. Slight confusion here. I think I may have misunderstood you, but I may not have explained myself properly. There are three things now which we concentrate upon. The first thing is the first individual murder of somebody, an act of Moses as a person, not as a prophet of God. That at that time also somebody came from somewhere and told him to leave. You remember that? Min Aqsal Madinate, another person came. That person must have come from the royal house and he must have befriended Moses because of his good qualities. Although he was not a prophet of God, but he was a sort of Siddiq to him. So he rushed to his side while Moses was living at that time in the Israelite quarters. So that person who rushed, he came from the royal house, evidently, because they were planning his murder. And he, being one of them, knew what was happening, so he rushed to the aid of Moses, while at that time he was living in his own people, among the Israelites. That is how we must have clarified the whole thing. That is one incident. The second is the incident which took place in the royal house. And Azazna Huma bi Salisin is the incident where nobody came from another quarter. This is what must be clarified, because no ABC from the quarters of, the living quarters of Israelites could have rushed to the royal house and said he would dare not, he would not be allowed to enter. So that incident took place when a man occupying the royal houses, the royal palaces, moved from his own palace to the place where they were gathered, and he had the authority, of course. He had the royal dignity to move to any other quarter and enter a place where they were contemplating things. So this is the third incident. And when Aqsal Madinate does not refer to the royal house. No person left the houses of Israel and went to royal house evidently. No person came from there, because he said, Ya Qawmi, O my people. So it's a completely different incident which must have taken place. This should be clarified, then I'll explain further what I think happened to which this verse is referred. Having understood this, a problem arises. If he belonged to the people of the Israelites, why should he have been referred to as coming from Aqsal Madinah? Because no Israelite could have gone to the palace to tell them that there is a prophet of God. Only Aqsal Madinah can be referred to royal houses and the houses occupied by Israelites. They are two different, distant places in one Medina. So why the Holy Quran again refers to Aqsal Madinah? Could it be possible that the same royal person was highly revered and respected by the entire township, and his voice, if added to the claim of Jesus, Hazrat Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, would be paid more respect. If that is possible, then the scenario changes to a very different scenario. Then it means that after Hazrat Moses had claimed, after the row had started, the people of Hazrat Moses and Harun did not agree altogether to their prophethood. There must have been rows among them. Some might have just succumbed to their superior political authority, and they might have been convinced that to leave this country and move away is right. Now, we understand that after the Exodus, a large number from among them were not true believers. So this incident possibly took place before the Exodus and after Hazrat Musa was rejected and he was living in the quarters of the Israelites. So a person from among them could not have come from Aqsal Medina. It has to be from royal houses, of course. But a person belonging to the royal houses who did believe in Moses and his faith was strengthened further, more and more. Previously he was hiding his faith. If he is the same person, then he grew powerful and stronger. When he addressed them as Aminu, obviously his faith was revealed. So the reference of the Holy Quran that he concealed his faith was no longer applicable to that person. When he openly said, don't do this to him, don't do this to them, and so on and so forth, then he must have revealed himself. As such, that person must have been a very big person who could not be touched. Like Pharaoh's own wife. She believed in Moses. She was tortured in so many ways, mentally I mean, but physically she was not touched. And she remained safe in the same palace. So this reference raises the image in my mind of perhaps the same person. This time he is openly known in the whole township as a believer in Moses. But because of his royal position, nobody touches him. He knows that Moses is not properly treated by his own people. And doubts are spread about him and things are said about him and his brother. So perhaps he decided to help Moses by supporting his cause. And as such, if this is the man, he must have grown more and more pious in the sight of Allah. You understand? As such, when he died, he must have been treated with honor by Allah's angels, and he remembers at that time what he had done, and his people did not fully agree with him, and he says, Ya layta qawmi, or oh why, oh woe to the people, my people. Had they only known how Allah has treated me, then they might have treated Moses with respect and Aaron with respect and might not have gone astray. This seems to be a possible scenario to me. If I'm wrong, I'll have to reconsider the whole verse and things, but I can't see any other explanation of this verse which may fit into this context. If anybody has an idea, let him suggest to me. Okay. Now, having said that, I have reconsidered the whole thing, and two problems have again arisen, which this solution, though apparently a good solution, this solution does not solve those two problems. What are those problems? Number one, that he addresses the people as his own people. While Aqsa al-Madinah indicates the royal house, how could he call the Israelites his own people? You understand? So that is one problem. The second is, he refers to as-saha, or the Quran refers to as-saha, which does not apply to the drowning of Pharaoh and his army, because that one was not a saha which did it. You understand? Now, as an afterthought, this is the new problem which faces me. And with the grace of Allah, I think I have resolved it. I feel I have resolved it. You remember the Holy Quran refers to Haman. And he was buried by a saha, by a great saha, which split the earth, and he was buried along with his treasures. He was not a people of Pharaoh's family. He was a person of Israelites, belonging to Israelites. This the Quran has very clearly been related, who had been treacherous to the cause of Israelites. And as such, he was honored by the pharaohs, and he was brought to live with them as a great man of Pharaoh's people and army and royal houses. So he was in fact a man who did not belong to Pharaoh's people, but by his misbehavior and treachery, he was honored by Pharaoh to be as if he belonged to his people. This we know from our experience happened in India when the British ruled India. They were sometimes very specially helped by great people of the time against the interest of the Indian people themselves. As such, they were honored and brought to the palaces, and they had access to the Seagull Lodge and so on and so forth. So it's a very similar case. Now, he must have got some other Israelites, relatives and others, who lived with him, and one of them is related by the Holy Quran to have objected against his attitude. So he must have been the person in this verse. One person from the royal house is mentioned in the Azazna part of the verse. One person from the Israelites who betrayed their cause and who was a traitor to them and had become a sort of royal person. He had some, naturally he was not just alone, many Israelites of his type or his choice must have surrounded him in his palace, because he also occupied a palace. He was so great, he rose so great in the sight of pharaohs that nobody could touch him, and he was allowed to build his own palace. Now, when I investigated him in a separate exercise, I don't know whether I spoke of this in this class or not, but I found out that this man was a means of amassing wealth for the pharaohs. He was a means of amassing their personal wealth, and he was instrumental in that, because he was the person who had access to buried treasures of the past pharaohs, and he had bands with him who would go to the old pyramids and knew where the treasures were buried. And he used to take them out and share it with pharaohs of the time, or the pharaoh of the time. In this way, he was indispensable. Like during the Second World War, some people became indispensable to Nazi Germany because they removed the most valuable pieces of art belonging to Hitler and others to safe deposits in Switzerland. So I don't want to go into the detail of that history, but people who know the history of the Second World War know it, that they were in fact spies of the West, but nobody could touch them because he has gained a reputation for being for being of help to such people who wanted to save their money. So the selfish motives got better of the people in power, and nobody suspected him of being a spy. Such was the importance of this person, Haman. And he lived a free life of his own, and it is not possible for us to imagine, visualize, that he lived entirely surrounded by the people of Pharaoh. His own people who wanted to gain power through him must have amassed around him. And as such, we read in the Quran that some of those who spoke of his greatness were not the people of Israel who lived at the other end. They were the same people who lived in his house and around him as subservient to him, and they used to be jealous of his greatness and his wealth. So some of them mentioned, we wish we had this wealth. And some of them disagreed with him. And they were inclined to be pious. So after this incident of an earthquake or something which buried him and his money alive in the ground, it must have been a great earthquake with a great saha. Then the Holy Quran tells us that the pious people among them said, didn't we say, this is not good. In vain you wished his wealth while God has taught you a lesson. I'm speaking in general terms, not referring to the verse and its translation. Or could it be possible that one of Haman's court believed in Moses, like one of Pharaoh's court also believed in him? So that justifies a separate reference, like we find it here. So that man must have gone from royal palaces, because Haman had his own palace in the same area. He must have noticed that Moses and Aaron are not treated with the due respect, and their own people many of their own people have rejected them. As such, he could go there and tell them, look here, you are my people, I know. They are right. So al-Mursaleen can be a general reference to all the Muslims, but this resolves both the problems for us. Why a saha is mentioned instead of flooding of the people, instead of the flood, and why the person manifests himself or indicates himself to be belonging to the people of Israel, despite being from Aqsa Medina. What do you think? Is it more satisfactory? At least it satisfies me now. I think previously I suggested things, but it had flaws. Now I am satisfied. Let's hope this is the true explanation, please. Could be the great violent sound created by zalzala. And that zalzala can cause people to be buried alive. As I read the verse, this hasiba is a different thing. But when you speak of as-saha, it is related to two different possible phenomena. Some people may have been destroyed by a great sound, but not necessarily buried. Some people may also be buried because of az-zalzala and that sound. So it is the beauty of the Quran that it relates all these incidents in this sequence, where as-saha can refer to Samud as well as to Qarun. In case of Qarun, it describes how the saha might have affected him. So I'm going to read this verse now to you. Have you finished?
Yeah, you may continue.
Yes. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقارون وفرعون وحامان. See people, وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ مُوسَى بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ فَاسْتَكْبَرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَمَا كَانُوا سَابِقِينَ. They could not run away from Allah's decree. كُلًّا أَخَذْنَا بِذَنبِهِ فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِ حَاصِبًا. Because before the people of Samud are mentioned, whom Hasiba had taken over. Rain of stones, buried them. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَخَذْنَاهُ السَّيْحَةُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ خَسَفْنَا بِهِ الْأَرْضَ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ أَغْرَقْنَا. Now the order is not clear to me because I don't exactly remember the order in which these incidents took place. But one thing is clear to me. أَخَذْنَاهُ السَّيْحَةُ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ خَسَفْنَا. As-sayha can cause different phenomena. As-sayha is also related to zalzala, which can bury people alive. As-sayha can also refer to such calamities of great terrorizing sounds, which may kill the people but may not bury them alive. So this is the sequence. This indicates, I have to refer to history, the real evidence, that the act of Aghraqna must have taken place after Qarun was buried. Because this is the sequence of these verses. And now I think it has to, because after that no one from there could go to Moses anyway, he was not there. After the flood, the reference to Egypt is finished. Then we move along Moses and what happened to him later on. The history we develop later. So this verse of the Quran also indicates that Qarun's burial must have taken place before the incident of the flood. See? Thank you for your question. It has revealed so many new things to me. While I read these verses, almost with closed eyes. It never occurred to me that these have to be resolved. Thank you. And the time is over.
I'll give a brief next time.
Huh?
Yes.
Next time?
I'll give a brief of the whole thing.
Okay.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.